So faraway events, national, international, and local events are all connected. History connects all these things. We can do the same thing with the Blackburn affair, the Blackburn Uprising. There is an uprising going on in Jamaica. It is sometimes called the Baptist War, Samuel Sharp's War, Sharp's Rebellion. But it is these black people who are leading a slave revolt, and they're trying to get free from slavery under the British. The British are in Jamaica. They're enslaving Africans in Jamaica to work on sugar plantations. A group of Africans lead an uprising, and led by Samuel Sharp. And this uprising causes two things. The Africans are killing the slave owners, and so that's a brutal process. But on top of that, the Europeans who are trying to resist or put down this slave rebellion are being brutal to Africans. So there's already a well-established abolitionist movement in England, and the brutality that's occurring in this slave rebellion is giving fuel to the abolitionist movement to be able to impress upon the British Parliament to end slavery. In 1833, the British Parliament ends slavery in the British Empire, partly as a response to this rebellion in Jamaica. It will take place as of 1834. So they vote to end slavery in the British Empire in 1833. It goes into effect the following year, 1834. Before the uprising in Jamaica, Thornton and Lucy Blackburn escaped from slavery in Louisville, Kentucky. Thornton is 19 years old. Lucy, she was Rutha at first, but she changes her name to Lucy when she gets free. Lucy is 27. They are a couple. They love each other, but Lucy has been sold down the river into New Orleans as a fancy woman. And a fancy woman is what we would probably call today human sex trafficking, where the slave owner makes the money from her forced prostitution. Lucy is to be sold into sexual slavery in New Orleans, and Thornton doesn't want that to happen to the woman he loves, and Lucy don't want that to happen to herself. So they escape, and they end up in the city of Detroit. In the city of Detroit, he's a brick mason, she's a seamstress. They're making a living for themselves, overthrowing the myth that people who are enslaved can only do unskilled labor, that all they can do is pick cotton, cut sugarcane, grow rice. No, they can do those things. Slavery in general is really run like a factory. Factories have skilled tradespeople. You need people who can do all kinds of things. So on a plantation, for instance, you need people who can do landscaping. You need people who do carpentry. When the clothes get ripped and stuff, you need a tailor who can fix them. You need a cook. You need both executive chef and sous chef, people who can take care of the animals. All of these are skilled trades. Brick masons, stone masons, iron and silversmiths. So who does that on a plantation? Monticello, you see the buildings and the structures that are built on Thomas Jefferson's plantation, and they always talk about, and Thomas Jefferson built this, and Thomas Jefferson ain't built none of that stuff. He had 600 people enslaved on his plantation. Thomas Jefferson wasn't building garages and building sheds. It's the people who he's enslaving who are building it. And so this is the kind of skilled trades that Africans have on these plantations. So much work that they did, but it doesn't benefit them. It benefits the slave owner. So they have these skilled trades, but they're not becoming wealthy and prominent because they have these skilled trades. Their slave owners are getting the benefit from these skilled trades until they get free. Once these black people get free, these become businesses for these black people. And they're able to train their children and grandchildren how to do these jobs, how to do these things so they can create a life for themselves. That's when it benefits black people, once they get free. So Thornton and Lucy are not free. They're in the city of Detroit. He's a brick mason, she's a seamstress. They're making a living for themselves, living right here in the city of Detroit. But under the auspices of the 1793 Fugitive Slave Law, they're not free. So even though they made it to a state, a free state, where slavery has been prohibited by the Northwest Ordinance, they're not free under the 1796 Fugitive Slave Law and under the Northwest Ordinance, which established Michigan as part of the United States, part of the Northwest Territory. There's a Fugitive Slave Clause, which states that even if you make it to one of these free states, you're not free, you are to be returned to your slave owners, and their agents can claim you. That means bounty hunters, slave catchers, patrollers can come and get you and bring you back into slavery. You are not free just because you made it to a so-called free state. So when two slave catchers come to the city of Detroit to claim Thornton and Lucy Blackburn, they've been cited in the city of Detroit by a relative of Thornton's slave owner. So a relative of Thornton's slave owner saw Thornton in Detroit. He goes back home and lets folks know. And so slave catchers are brought here, bounty hunters, come to the city of Detroit to capture Thornton and Lucy Blackburn. They pay the sheriff and deputy $50 apiece. The sheriff and deputy assist the two slave catchers in capturing Thornton and Lucy Blackburn, and they're placed in the jail in Detroit. And that jail was located at that time on Gratiot and Farmer, which is behind where the CompuWare building or One Campus Marsh's building is today, or where the Hudson site is, where the old Hudson's building was, and where they're building a new skyscraper. It's behind there. Today, what sits at that site is the Skillman branch of the Detroit Public Library. So it's in downtown Detroit. That's where the jail was before that library got put there. And so they're being held there, and they're gonna be held there until a boat comes up the Detroit River to take them to Ohio. Once they get to Ohio, of course, they're probably wagging them down into Kentucky. Lucy's already been sold into slavery in New Orleans. She just needs to be sent there. She's never made it to New Orleans, but she's already been sold into New Orleans as a fancy woman. Thornton, of course, their plan is to take him back into Louisville where he'd be enslaved, but of course he'd be punished, severely punished for this escape. Well, a group of black people have a meeting at the home of Benjamin Willoughby. Benjamin Willoughby is a prominent African-American, prominent black man in the city of Detroit, owns a business, has good relationships with other prominent people in the city of Detroit, including some white folks. And it's at his home where the meeting is held. And so black people are meeting at the home of Benjamin Willoughby, and there are women who are leaders in that meeting. They're not just there serving tea and cookies. Anytime that black people have made progress, black women have been at the forefront of that progress. Whether it was at the Underground Railroad, the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power Movement, the labor movement, the women's movement, starting businesses, starting churches, education. Black women have always been at the forefront of black people's progress. Sometimes when we tell the history, we leave the women out and make it seem like the men did it all by themselves. That's the wrong way to view this history. We have to look at how the history actually happened. And when we look at how the history really happened, women are doing all this stuff. It's just how when we tell it, women are missing from the story. Two women there who are part of this meeting, Caroline French and Tabitha Lightfoot, they're young women, but they're just as active in the leadership of this plan as everybody else. And they're coming up with a way to free Thornton and Lucy Blackburn. That's their friends, and they don't want this to happen. Number one, they don't want it to happen because it's their friends. Number two, they don't want it to happen because they don't want a trend to be created where slave catchers can come to the city of Detroit, grab people and take them back into slavery and nobody does anything. And so they care about Thornton and Lucy Blackburn, and they care about the black community, particularly the freedom-seeking community, people who've escaped from slavery. They care about them in general. So they're coming up with a plan to free Thornton and Lucy Blackburn. This is Friday, June 14th, 1833. So that's Friday. And Saturday, there's probably still trying to work out this plan. Sunday, most of the people who are the leadership of the group go to church. Many of them are members of First Baptist Church. First Baptist Church is a predominantly white church, but it does have some significant black members, including the Lightfoots, Tabitha and her husband Madison, the Frenches, George and his wife, Caroline French. They go to church on Sunday, but after church, they go down to the jail to visit Thornton and Lucy Blackburn. Thornton is not allowed to have any visitors. He is actually behind bars in shackles, as if the bars aren't enough for this man. We gotta have him in chains behind the bars because we're so worried about this guy. But Lucy, they're not worried about her. So she is allowed to have visitors, and she's not in chains behind bars. They don't see her as much of a threat. Big mistake on their part. Caroline French and Tabitha Lightfoot go in the jail cell with Lucy Blackburn. And while in the jail cell, they prayed with her because they believed in the power of prayer. And they brought her some food because jail food is horrible. Still is to this day, don't ask me how I know. But jail food is horrible. While they're feeding her and praying with her, Caroline French switches clothes with Lucy Blackburn inside of the jail cell. When the sheriff comes to the jail cell to tell the women that visiting is over, Tabitha Lightfoot walks out with Lucy Blackburn wearing Caroline French's clothes. The sheriff does not know the difference. This black woman leaves out with another black woman. They put her on a boat and send her over to Canada, where she is now free. The next morning, Caroline French alerts the sheriff to who she is. You, Mr. Sheriff, guess what? I'm Caroline French. Remember, I came here yesterday and visited Lucy Blackburn. You weren't paying attention? We changed clothes, we switched. She walked right by you and you ain't even know. Now, our plan was to put her on a boat and get her to Canada, so by now she's probably in Canada, so she's free, and I'm free too. You better let me go. This is what Caroline French is really letting them know. Now, these are bounty hunters who have captured them. Bounty hunters make money for bringing people back. They don't make money for coming back empty-handed. They've lost Lucy Blackburn. So they say, basically, you switched. You gonna switch. And we gonna sell you to make up whatever we can in the loss of Lucy. And Caroline French is basically like, I'm from Detroit. Plus I'm from the east side. Not gonna happen. When they walk out of that jail cell, there's 400 people outside. They got bricks, sticks, knives, swords, tree branches, poles. Some of them have guns. And so they let Caroline French go. They realize they outnumbered. They gotta let Caroline French go, hoping that will quell the crowd and send them back home. But the crowd is there for Thornton too. They're not just there for Lucy. Lucy is released after the crowd is outside and there are people who bring in documents from family members and friends of the family and even prominent white folks in the city of Detroit saying they gotta let Lucy go. So they let Lucy go because they're worried about this crowd and they're worried about the pressure from the prominent people that her family knows. But now they're gonna try to make it through this crowd with Thornton, and they're not gonna be able to make it through the crowd. The crowd is gonna break the back wheels of the wagon. They surround the wagon. Thornton is in the wagon. The two slave catchers and the sheriff and the deputy, they got weapons, but not enough for 400 people. Even if they get 4 shots off with their shotguns, after that, it's over. You can get your 4 shots off, maybe you hit 4 people, but then the other 396 or so will kill you. So they realize their life is in danger. They can do the math and realize that their guns are of no use with a mob this large. And so it's Thornton who offers to save them. Thornton says they're not gonna move for you. You can keep threatening them and waving those guns all you want, but they're not gonna move for you, but they'll move for me. Let me talk to the crowd. And the deputy allows Thornton to talk to the crowd. Thornton is in the wagon, he's talking, crowd is kind of noisy, plus Thornton is not speaking loudly, so they can't hear him. So members of the crowd move in closer to try to hear what Thornton is saying. And they get so close that Madison Lightfoot, Tabitha's husband, hands Thornton a gun. Once Thornton gets that gun in his hand, it becomes very clear what he's saying now. You better let me go, I'ma shoot y'all. Madison Lightfoot, who gave him the gun, said, kill them, shoot them all. And so there's this, again, there's this history of fighting for freedom, and there's also this history of by any means necessary. Detroit is not known for nonviolent civil disobedience. And Madison Lightfoot, who says kill them, shoot them all, is Reverend Madison Lightfoot. So the Reverend is telling him to kill everybody. Thornton doesn't do it though. Thornton does not do what but he shoots in the air. But once he does that, that's like the signal to go off. So everybody's unleashing whatever they got. The sheriff is hit with items. He's also thrown to the ground. He is no longer a part of the standoff. He's injured severely and will die a while later from those injuries. But at that night, he's out. The deputy has to flee for his life to keep from being torn apart. And the 2 slave catchers have to keep the crowd at bay with their guns and get out the way so that they don't get killed. But while all that is happening, the crowd has taken Thornton, put him on a wagon. That wagon takes off to the river. He's put on a boat, crosses over the river, reunited with his wife, Lucy, and they are free in Canada. What the city does is they arrest as many people as they can. Some people weren't even involved in the uprising, but because they're black, they get arrested. The city council comes up with 5 ordinances. Negroes and mulattoes who come to the city of Detroit have to pay a $500 fee to the county clerk. They're going to vigorously enforce this. Negroes and mulattoes who come to Detroit have to pay a $500 fee to the county clerk. If you don't pay it, and if you haven't paid it, they're looking for you. So a whole bunch of black people leave Detroit until this all blows over. Second, Negroes and mulattoes must be off the streets by 9 p.m. It is the first curfew that we have record of in Michigan's history. And this curfew is not, for safety reasons. This curfew is for black people. Keep y'all off the streets. So you're not helping people escape from slavery, and you're not leading the uprising to help people get free from slavery. The third one is if it's dark, but not 9 p.m., black people have to carry a lantern. Negroes must carry a lantern in front of them. It's a lantern law, basically saying that we got to be able to see you, and then you got to identify yourself to any white person and what your business and state what your business is in the streets. And then the next one is Negroes cannot dock their boats on the Detroit River. They realize these black folks must have had some boats. How did they get them over to Canada? So you know what? We're just gonna keep them from having boats. So now can't have no more boats. Can't dock your boats on the Detroit River, which is basically saying you can't have a boat. The last one is a 16-man patrol will be created that will enforce these new ordinances and will patrol the docks to make sure that there aren't people escaping from slavery and there aren't people helping people escape from slavery. And they'll assist the deputy and sheriff in case another uprising occurs. So it's not the deputy and the sheriff out there by themselves. Is they have a backup 16-man patrol. So this is what will be created. After that, the mayor, Marshall Chapin, the governor, Stephen T. Mason, and the president of the United States, Andrew Jackson, petitioned Canada to send Thornton and Lucy Blackburn back. Canada has agreed in their treaty to send any felons from the United States back to the United States. The United States has agreed that any felons from Canada who come to the United States will be extradited. It's an extradition treaty. And so they're arguing that these people incited a riot that caused the death of a sheriff. That's the felony. And so you got to send them back. This makes it to the highest court in Canada. The Canadian courts rule that if we send them back, their slave owners are going to claim them. We're sending them back to slavery if we send them back. So we'd be sending them back to a penalty that our country no longer has. But their country just no longer has that. This just happened in 1834 because of an uprising in Jamaica, which caused England to end slavery in the British Empire. Had this happened 5 years before, that wouldn't have been the case. Canada would have still had slavery. That international event in Jamaica changed British policy, which changed Canadian policy, which made Canada tell the United States, we're not sending them back. And so Thornton and Lucy Blackburn will move to Toronto, start the first taxi company in the city of Toronto, build 5 homes for other people who escaped. Thornton will come back to the city of Detroit secretly, go back to Louisville, Kentucky secretly, and save his mother, Sibby Blackburn, from slavery. She'll live her final years with her son and daughter-in-law in freedom. And the people who led the uprising to free Thornton and Lucy Blackburn, just about all of them will leave First Baptist Church and found Second Baptist Church, the oldest black church in the state of Michigan, the foundation for the Underground Railroad, the first school for black people, because see, for black people, faith and freedom go hand in hand. They're the same thing. So the same people who are helping people escape from slavery are the same people starting churches. If you were to go back in time and you was looking for where the black people are being hidden, you just go right to the churches. That's where they consider that part of your faith. You are a true faithful believer if you ain't helping people escape and get freedom. And you ain't a true believer in freedom if you're not educating people. They believe that education is part of freedom. Faith and freedom go hand in hand, and education is a part of that freedom fight. That church 30 churches will come out of that church, 2 of which were in Canada. One of them in Canada is called First Baptist of Sandwich, or Sandwich First Baptist. The first pastor at Sandwich First Baptist is Madison Lightfoot, the pastor who gave Thornton the gun. Second Baptist is founded in the home of Caroline French, the woman who switched clothes with Lucy Blackburn. That's where the church was founded. It's been in Greektown since 1857. That was not even Greektown in 1857. There weren't Greek immigrants in Detroit in 1857. That's part of Black Bottom. And it's the oldest black church. 30 churches come out of it. It's where the first black institutions, first black organizations, first black civil rights fights all come out of that church. And it'll be followed by 2 other churches in the city of Detroit, of course, Bethel AME and St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. And these churches are helping people establish themselves in education, civil rights, and in business. Many of those first loans that people are getting to start a business and those first connections, networking with other business people are in these churches. So they're either getting loans directly from the church or from members of the church. These businesses will begin to be created out of this connection between faith and freedom. And eventually you have a whole business district, which is known as Paradise Valley by the time we get to the Great Migration period.